Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. We're very excited that you're joining us to cover this important topic, drowning machines, the danger of low-head dams, and what we can do to fix it. Our speakers today are Hattie Johnson, the Southern Rockies Restoration Director with American Whitewater, and me, Katie Schmidt. I'm the Associate Director of the National Dam Removal Program here at American Rivers. I want to pause and acknowledge that today's webinar is not the lightest subject. As the name entails, we will be talking about the deadly consequences of low-head dams. This can be a sensitive subject, and we want to give a clear warning before we move forward. I do invite you all to be fully present with us for the next hour. We're here to cover a lot of ground, and I invite you to be fully engaged with us as we do that. You have permission to close any extra tabs, your email, Slack, silence notifications that may be distracting. And as we move through this information, please write out your thoughts and questions and comments for us. Share your ideas as they move forward. A few webinar housekeeping tips. Okay, I already see people have found their way to the chat. That is wonderful. You all are muted with your cameras off, but you can still communicate with us. There's two main ways. You can use the chat feature, which some folks are already using, and the Q&A feature. Please use the chat for comments and the Q&A for questions. There's over 150 of y'all and counting, so the questions can get lost in the chat. I'd like everybody to take a moment and enter in the chat your name, organization, and location. I'll type mine in, Katie Schmidt. I'm with American Rivers. And today I get to call in from Richmond, Virginia. So thanks everybody for being here. I want to do a quick plug for our upcoming webinar series. A link will be shared after this presentation. In June, we are going to do a 4-part webinar series on the Bloody Dam removal on the Patapsco River in Maryland. We'll have 4 weekly webinars that will dive into the details of this very complex project. And then we're actually doing a site visit in person in July. So you can use the QR code to register. I'll share the link later as well. But we'll be going into regulation, sediment management, land development. The Fun with Fish is diving into our biological monitoring, which is actually still ongoing. American Rivers has been regularly putting on dam removal webinars since late 2023, and recordings of all of our past webinars are available on our National Dam Removal Community of Practice webpage. So today we are having a co-presentation from American Rivers and American Whitewater. Hattie and I are really excited to be with you today. We're both working for national river conservation organizations. So a little background on both of us. American Rivers restores damaged rivers, protects wild rivers, and conserves clean water for people and nature. We've been removing dams for 25 years, and we've managed more than 350 dam removal projects. American Whitewater also protects and restores American whitewater reaches, focusing on the recreational aspect and enhancing opportunities to enjoy them safely. And American Whitewater has been working to improve safety around dams and has been involved in some of the biggest dam removals in the country. So we're both really excited to be with you here today, and I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Hattie. Take it away.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Katie, and welcome everyone. It's great to see such an amazing turnout and some familiar names out there. So I really appreciate you all joining us this afternoon. Like Katie said, my name is Hattie Johnson. I am coming to you today from Carbondale, Colorado, where I work for American Whitewater as our Southern Rockies Restoration Director. I have been with American Whitewater for about 6 years now, and somewhat pertinent to this topic today. Prior to that work, I got to work in river restoration work with a background in landscape architecture, and through that had a really great opportunity to work on a number of low-head dam removal and retrofit projects all around the country. As a paddler myself, I had some awareness and some unfortunate run-ins with low-head dams, so I had an understanding of the danger that these structures can present. However, as I have started to work more closely and in these projects more, I've been impressed both with the abundance of these structures, the limited knowledge folks have on the impact to rivers, the threat to public safety, and maybe a bit more optimistically, the opportunities there are to take them out. So to get us started, so we're all working from the same page, what is a Lowhead Dam? These are structures, they're man-made, they're built in a river or a stream. They go from one side to the other, fully blocking or fully impacting the flow of water. And then importantly, and as you can see from this picture here, water is flowing over continuously over the top of them. Katie, if you'll hit, there's a little more text on this slide, if you'll hit once more. So there are a handful of definitions around about what exactly a Lowhead Dam is, but utilizing language from the Water Resources Development Act from last year, that this was legislation that Katie and I both worked on with a number of other amazing partners to implement a national Lowhead Dam inventory, which Katie will talk a little bit more about. But it defined these Lowhead dams here. And I think the important thing I want to point out is the size of these structures. So the one we're looking at in the picture here, you know, a few feet, not incredibly large, but anything that's basically under 25 feet tall. Some of you on the call today may be familiar with the National Inventory of Dams, the NID, those capture. That's an inventory managed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and that captures dams over 25 feet tall. And so with this legislation, and with this talk today, we're talking about those somewhat smaller structures. But if you're like me, 25 feet is significantly over your head. So still not terribly small. So let's talk a little bit more about what exactly the danger is involved. So Katie, if you'll go to the next slide. Wonderful. So Lowhead dams create a danger to the public, primarily recreating public, for a number of reasons. I'll talk about the hydraulic issue here in just a second, and we've got a fun little video for you to look at, but I wanted to talk just more about kind of what these things look like out on the landscape or out in the river, and why they can create an issue. So as the title of this presentation may give you a clue, these are typically called drowning machines, but they're also often look pretty inconspicuous. They're, especially for recreators without the knowledge of the danger. If you're in a wild river and you see something man-made, it's poured concrete, it seems like it can be a safe place. And so in this image that we see here, this is describing how exactly it is not. So from upstream has a nice clear, what's called a horizon line. It makes it very hard to see the recirculating current then that is created right at the bottom of these dams. So the concrete, the nice, clean, flat, uniform line that's created by the top of a Lowhead dam makes a perfect recirculating current. Water flows over that and basically folds back on itself like a washing machine. And so from the top, they're very hard to recognize. And then once you're in it, you're stuck in a recirculating current it's very difficult to get out. And with that, Katie, will you bring up our video that we can see a poor little doll man stuck? All right, so here's
Ken on a lovely summer day.
I don't know if you guys are getting volume, but if you want to talk through it, Hattie.
Yeah, so this, I guess, is Ken. But as you see, went over the structure and is getting kind of just tumbled around. So this is that recirculating current. And then additionally, and I think is even scarier for me is what we call the boil line. So what you just saw there, Ken was starting to float downstream, or maybe even coming up from downstream. Maybe he was fishing or swimming with kids, and the strength of that current can often trap recreators and pull them towards the dam. So unfortunately, many of the fatalities we've seen, we see at Low Head dams happen not only just from boaters and floaters, somebody coming from upstream, it also can impact those recreating downstream. Those powerful currents can pull people back up. So incredibly dangerous. If you'll go to the next slide. There have been more than 1,400 fatalities at these structures across the country. That is a huge amount. To kind of put that into context of other accidents on rivers, American Whitewater has captured the number of accidents and fatalities on rivers around the country since the 70s. All of those fatalities, 10% of them are people being trapped in a Low Head dam hydraulic. So just a huge percentage for this one issue, and quite frankly, a man-made issue that is creating such a dangerous and fatal issue. As you'll see here too, it's estimated there's 50 more fatalities annually. This is an issue that I think we see in communities, and I think with increasing efforts to educate the public on the dangers, but we'll get into in just a few minutes the massive abundance of these structures around the country. And I think that will kind of link to why we have such high and awful numbers here with the fatalities. So with that, Katie, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks so much, Hattie. Before we dive into, what's happening at the national level and where these dams are, in addition to being a public safety hazard, Low Head dams still do damage the environment in which they were built. And so I want to acknowledge the additional impacts of dams. To be clear, low head does not mean low impact. So we still see that these structures block and fragment habitat, which causes aquatic organisms to lose access to critical spawning grounds and diverse populations and various food sources. We know that dams can change the habitat and degrade it by taking a flowing water system and changing it to a non-flowing water system. Reservoirs can inundate important flood habitat and can inundate culturally significant sites as well. The stagnant water in the reservoirs can warm up more easily than flowing water, and at times this temperature becomes too warm for aquatic organisms to survive. We also know that the water can lose its dissolved oxygen concentration, and this can help contribute to harmful algal blooms and bacteria that would otherwise not be growing in free-flowing rivers. In addition to changing the water, dams can change the sediment distribution. So sediment that naturally would be moved downstream is trapped behind the dams, resulting in sediment-starved portions downriver. And yes, even the Low Head dams do this as well. So there are bigger impacts, or not bigger, big impacts in addition to the safety implications. So where are the Low Head dams? How do we find them? I pulled this picture down from NOAA this morning. This is on their Low Head Dam Safety Awareness page, and this demonstrates the horizon line that Hattie was talking about. If you squint your eyes, you might be able to see where the Low Head Dam is. We'll give you all a minute with it. This is it from downstream. So if you see this stick here in the middle, you can see it very barely in the shadow of the tree. But this is just an example of how difficult it is to see these structures. So where are they actually? They are all over the place. Before I show you guys a map, I have a little poll that I would like to have everybody fill out. So I'm going to start a Low Head Dam location question. So you guys all should see a poll. Hattie, can you see the poll popped up?
Yes,
Everybody?
I can.
Okay, excellent. So if you guys can all take a minute, I know maybe you guys are eating a snack, but answer these questions for me. Is there a Low Head Dam near you? And if you know the difference between 5 and 20 miles, great. If you don't, just guess. If you don't know, that's okay too. We're here to share information and get folks the information they need. If you have a Low Head Dam near you, the next question I want you to think about is, have you seen signage at these Low Head dams in your community? What's the signage like? Is it upstream and downstream? Is it just signage upstream? If there's no signage, enter that too. We want to get that information. And then finally, is there a portage path around the Low Head Dam in your community? If you know that, we would like to know. And if you don't know what portage means, that's okay too. Please enter that. We want to know. It's important data points. I'll give us 10 more seconds for folks to answer these quick questions, and then I'll close the poll. Good participation rate. Thanks all. 3, 2, 1, end poll. I think I can share the results with you. I don't actually know what it looks like for everybody, but I'm hoping that y'all can see that the first question is there a Low-Head Dam near you? A lot of folks answered yes. A couple of folks said no. A couple of folks said, I don't know. That's okay. We'll share resources and how you can find out. Have you seen signage? Some yeses, but a lot of no's, way more no's than there are yeses. Okay, that's interesting. Is there a portage path? A lot of no's. Okay. And a couple of I don't knows, which is all right. We'll get there. I'll address portage now. Portage means to take your boat out and walk around. If you really want to be fancy, you can say portage. But basically, it means get out, walk around whatever feature. It could be a dam, it could be a log. But ideally, around a Low-Head Dam, we have some type of portage path so that recreationalists can get out safely, higher above stream around the dam and walk around and then get downstream, get back in the river downstream, far enough that you're not in that boil line that Hattie pointed out for us in that video. Okay. So where are the Low-Head Dams? Here is your map. They are everywhere. We know there's at least 13,000 dams in the US. And while these dams were originally built to serve local needs, providing water for irrigation, powering mills, factories, supporting navigation, all sorts of things, a lot of them are not used anymore, and many of these still remain in place. They're outdated and unneeded. They're still taking lives. I actually live in Richmond, Virginia, and right downtown, we've got the James River flowing through it. We have 5 Low-Head Dams. 3 of those are partially broken, right? So there is fish passage and there is a way to safely go through them, but the other 2 have both taken lives in the past 5 years. So it is very much a problem throughout communities. And people need to know where these dams are. Not just that, they need to know that they're hazardous and to not get close to them. We need accurate maps. So we have this National Inventory of Low-Head Dams maps. And this is an excellent start. This was done by the Low-Head Dam Task Force, started by Dr. Roland Hotchkiss at Brigham Young University. And he actually worked with partners to catalog the 13,000 Low-Head Dams that we know of right now. And they also did a lot of advocacy and awareness around Low-Head Dams. So thank you, Dr. Hotchkiss, for all your work. I think I saw in the chat that you might even be on the call, which is wonderful. We appreciate all the work that you and your partners have been doing. They also saw a need for the inventory to grow and include additional information. So let's take a minute and talk about the national dam inventories. There are several inventories out there. The main one that most folks are aware of is the National Inventory of Dams. This is what Hattie mentioned earlier. This is managed by the Army Corps of Engineers. It has a lot of information on every single data point. They've got about 92,000 dams right now. All of the dams in the National Inventory of Dams need to be of a certain size or jurisdiction and meet that criteria in order to be included. So it's not all dams in the US. To meet that need, the National Aquatic Barrier Inventory and Prioritization Tool, developed by the Southeast Aquatic Restoration Partnership, there will be a quiz in all these acronyms, they developed this tool where they mapped all the dams in the country, and they're at 554,000 dams and counting. So there's this tool as well to map out dams, and they have a feature where you can select for low-head dams or potential low-head dams. And then we also have the tool that Dr. Hotchkiss and his team came up with, the National Inventory of Low-Head Dams. So all of these are great sources of information, but the National Inventory of Low-Head Dams doesn't actually have additional information for each of those data points. And it's hosted by the Brigham Young University. So when I say we, it's a royal we, a lot of folks work together on this, on advocating for a national inventory of low-head dams that would be hosted by the Corps in the same way that the National Inventory of Dams is. So this low-head dam inventory is coming soon. I actually just got to talk to Becky Reagan, who is the project manager for the National Inventory of Dams, and they are getting to roll this out. They're taking the information from the National Inventory of Low-Head Dams and moving that into the Army Corps of Engineers hosted low head dam inventory. And if you guys are data nerds like myself and you want to help with feedback on this, let me know and I will connect you with Becky and her team. So this low head dam inventory is really exciting because it will take and provide additional information for the public. I'm going to go through this next part a little bit more quickly because Hattie covered it, but the National Low Head Dam Inventory was a national effort. We had to work on federal policy on this. We had to get this language included in the Water Resources Development Act, and we were first able to include that language in 2022. We had to do some tweaks, add it again in 2024, but now, woohoo, we're to pass into law, and we actually have the National Low Head Dam Inventory coming down the pipe. So that's really exciting, and that was the work of a lot of partners advocating for this to happen. There's also, at the national level, we have a Low Head Dam Public Safety Awareness Month. This was started by partners a few years ago to try to draw more awareness around low head dams. They designated April as the Public Safety Awareness Month for this. And each April, you're probably, if you're paying attention to this, or you're the person who's putting out the social media, you'll see a lot of awareness around low head dams and trying to point out where low head dams in different communities are. So we're really excited that this awareness month is happening and that each year it seems to get more people signed on to it, including local news outlets where a lot of folks are receiving their information. So additional efforts also include FEMA's National Dam Safety Program, which is really important because the National Dam Safety Program, a lot of this and a lot of state dam safety offices in general are focused on the structural safety of a dam. So making sure it doesn't fall apart and start killing people with a wall of water. So a lot of it is focused on that, but they're starting to realize, we need to shift more about the actual hazard that the dam structure poses. And there's more and more discussions within the National Dam Safety Program and even within state offices to address low head dams for the hazards that they are. So that's really exciting. Additional efforts are that states are starting to take up more of this. Every state, welcome to the party, Alabama. They just passed legislation to get themselves a dam safety office. Every state now has a state dam safety office. They have officials where they are going to go out and they'll monitor dams across the state that fall into their jurisdiction. They make sure that those dams are as safe as possible. And if they're not safe, they're having the dam owners take steps to make them safe. But more and more are starting to build in capacity to address low head dams. So I want to highlight three actually. Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Virginia have specific legislation where they're requiring signage at low head dams. This is actually a sign from the James River, one of the signs that was put up fairly recently. And the states require signage above, some require it below, some require buoys above. And we'd really like to see this legislation. We're hoping that more and more states adopt this, but this is one way that getting public awareness around dams is increasing so that we have less fatalities. And Indiana actually passed additional legislation this year that I want to read off to you guys because it's so impactful. So here's what it is. This was just passed into law in April. It is the public safety policy of the state of Indiana that low head dams are a threat to public safety, stream ecological processes, and navigability. It is in the public interest to remove low head dams that are an encroachment on navigable waterways to promote public safety for recreational use and enjoyment of the public trust, avoid adverse effects to fish, wildlife, and botanical resources, and not impair the navigability of a waterway. That state legislation that is prioritizing removal of low head dams. That is huge. So way to go, Indiana. They've had a huge, for years, they've been doing a lot of public and community education around low head dams. They have some of the videos that you guys may have seen, Over, Under, Gone, and this other one is shorter, Be a Dam Champion. So those are some really good awareness campaign videos that the state has put out that have helped lead to the adoption of this legislation. And then lastly, national efforts are removing dams. So folks who are realizing they've got dams in their communities that aren't serving a purpose, they're starting to remove those. And where to start with dam removal? There's a lot of resources out there. So you want to start with figuring out who owns the dam, gather some basic information. If you're the dam owner, great. If you're not, try to find out who the dam owner is, what the dam's being used for. We have a lot of resources on our restoration resource page, which I made a fancy QR code for y'all. And you want to connect with local conservation groups. The National Community of Practice of Dam Removal Practitioners has more than 1,000 members. So there's an abundance and wealth of knowledge across the country. But if you want to get even more local, you're going to start with your ACT. And I'm going to pass it over to Hattie to dive into the aquatic connectivity teams.
Fantastic. So there, as Kitty was talking about, there are lots of resources and quite frankly, lots of states that are addressing safety and danger at low head dams. If you're looking at this map and you're like, hey, we've got a great program and we don't have a nice little colored, we're not colored in, that's all right. We're specifically going to be talking about these aquatic connectivity teams. So we know states like Iowa, Indiana, we just talked about, have done amazing things either through state legislation or their Department of Natural Resources to address safety concerns and stream fragmentation created by low head dams. One really cool tool, though, is these aquatic connectivity teams. So thanks to the Southeast Aquatic Resources Partnership that you heard Katie mention early in American Rivers, there are teams all around the country, all these blue colored in states, that bring together state and federal agency staff, NGOs, tribes, businesses to come together and broadly address stream fragmentation and work to improve aquatic connectivity at dams, culverts, and of course, low head dams. These teams, of course, look different everywhere you go, and in each state, they've got a variety of goals and approaches, but generally the central joining force is they're looking to improve on a broad scale stream connectivity. If you'd like to learn more, I would definitely point you to, I think, both American Rivers and SARP, that's the Southeastern Aquatic Resources Partnership, have websites that'll link you and so you can learn more about these teams in your state. If you'll go to the next slide, Katie, I'll talk a little bit more about our team here in Colorado. So I have had the pleasure of helping to build and grow our aquatic connectivity team here in Colorado. It's brand new, kicked off last fall, but it was standing on the foundation, a strong foundation of work in the state. So in 2019, as I was new at American Whitewater, I got looped in to a project that was being carried and led by our chief dam safety officer in the state, and really to look at the safety issues at low head dams. That work initially resulted in an inventory of low head dams, primarily on main stem rivers. They were looking mostly at places where people would commonly be floating, fishing, and recreating. That also was followed up with a really great public education campaign and a couple of signage projects. So there were two low head dams that had accidents recorded at them that got new portage paths and signs, like we talked about in the poll. But there also were good stickers, posters all around, and even some radio advertisements in multiple languages talking about both how to recognize low head dams and how to be sure to stay away from them. So our work here in Colorado is kind of hoping to carry forward that incredible work done by our dam safety officer, and has brought together local watershed groups who are already working on a lot of these projects, state and federal agencies, and look at how we can improve and expand on some of the great work that's already been done, and do it at a watershed scale. This picture that we're looking at is the Reed Chatfield diversion. Oh, actually, you can stay there. On the San Miguel River, this is a really great example of a place where the local San Miguel Watershed Partnership has done a ton of work. There's a section of river that basically is mostly not used by the public because it has 3 very dangerous low-head dams on it. They have already received funding to mitigate the dangerous hydraulic that you see in this picture here. Katie and I were running through this presentation yesterday and both looking at this photo with our stomachs churning a little bit because it's really nasty. You can really see that recirculating current there. So projects like this is a great example of where there's a lot of local efforts going in, and we are hoping with our aquatic connectivity team that we can help bring resources and expertise and just support to get this and the other 2 projects on this reach done. Another example, Katie, if you'll go to the next slide, is a project American Whitewater has been involved in. This is on the Cache-la-Poudre River, which is in northern Colorado, so kind of opposite side of the state from the San Miguel. The map that you're looking at here on the right is a screenshot just from American Whitewater's website, where we track and show whitewater resources and river reaches. And that big red dot there is just highlighting what looks like a short little gap between what you can see as mini boatable miles, which is to the left of the screen. That's all upstream. This is the Cache-la-Poudre is our only wild and scenic river in Colorado, and then a little fun class 2-3 section downstream. The reason that gap's there is that there's 2 big nasty low head dams in it. The picture on the left is one of those. That's the Gateway Diversion. It's owned by the city, and another one upstream that's owned by a regional water provider and operated by a local irrigation company. Out in Colorado, we have the system of water rights that makes totally giving up diversion points difficult, but there are a lot of opportunities to mitigate the safety issues that we see at these dams, and we're moving forward with doing a retrofit of both these dams that would provide upstream passage for fish and aquatic organisms, as well as navigability downstream for boaters. So we hope to fill in that line in the red dot here on the map in the next handful of years. So just a couple of examples of how our team in Colorado is working, and I'll pass it back to Katie to talk about a few more success stories.
Thanks, Hattie. So sticking in Colorado, I have another Colorado example, and this is of a dam removal. So this is the Mount Chavano Fish Hatchery Diversion Dam that was built on the Arkansas River in just north of Salida, Colorado, up in the mountains. And this dam was built to divert water for a fish hatchery and was used for many years. And then at some point there was whirling disease in the river and they stopped using it. But the dam didn't go away, and the dam continued to pose a public safety hazard. So they built a boat chute around it. And you can see that here in this in the picture to the right. If you're looking, lookers right, downstream, river left, you can see the boat chute here where people could get around and stay in their boats, but navigate around the dam safely. Even with that, they still had multiple fatalities at this site. And so that was a known hazard. At the same time, American Whitewater actually took the whole state inventory of low-head dams in Colorado, and they prioritized them for which ones should be addressed first. This diversion dam scored highest by a factor of 2. So this also factored into the decision to, really put some heat under bums and get some action on it, and address the dam. So Colorado Parks and Wildlife that owned the dam, it was actually owned by a subset, Arkansas Headwaters Recreation Area, which is a part of Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Lots of little complicated logistics. So there was ownership as an issue at first. There's also water rights because this is Colorado. Once those were navigated through, though, they removed this dam so quickly, and they were taking it out fairly fast compared to other dam removals. And now they have a safer section of the Arkansas River. And I really love highlighting the story because it's a removal that was driven by public safety, and specifically public safety around a low-head dam. which surprisingly is not actually as common as you might think. And I have another example to share with you to highlight that. It has a happy ending, but a very sad beginning. This is the Melbourne Dam on the Neuse River, just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. And this dam was built for hydro, but it stopped operating in the early 2000s. And it sat unused and unmaintained until it was removed in 2017. This structure was just outside of the major city of Raleigh, North Carolina, and it was around a park system, and a lot of people recreated around this area. And this dam took 15 lives, at least, that we have on record before it was removed. But at the end of the day, it wasn't removed for safety, it was removed for mitigation credits. While partners, including American Rivers, had advocated for its removal for years, it ultimately was not safety that drove its removal. And I bring this example up because it's not unique to have unused low-head dams just sitting in rivers. And unfortunately, this is all too common that they are unused and they continue to claim lives as they just sit there. So what does it mean to take on low-head dams? When we say that we're taking action, we're taking steps, what are the results? We are going to have improved public safety. We're going to have better recreational quality. We will see improved river health. We're going to be able to restore habitat connectivity, improved water quality. You have all these benefits, right? But the big highlighter is improved public safety. You are no longer having unmaintained infrastructure that is claiming lives. Hattie said this stat earlier, and I'm going to repeat it. The average is 50 fatalities at low-head dams per year. And more people are starting to recreate on rivers, and so we might see that number start to go up. So what did we talk about today? We talked about what a low-head dam is and why it's hazardous. So now we have all these new words, including portage, how to find low-head dams. We know a little bit more about what's going on at the national and state level efforts to address dams, these low-head dams, and how local partners like aquatic connectivity teams support addressing low-head dams, whether it's through removal or retrofit. But where do we go from here, and what can you do with this information? You all here on the call, there's 201 of you right now. You all can take the time to spread awareness about low-head dams. Share this with your networks, share this with your communities, share this with your neighbors. I still have people that think I work with beavers, and I help to inform them, no, I don't. Not yet anyway. But talking about what a low-head dam is and where they are and why it's important to know. You can support, if you have this in your professional capacity, you can support funding that's committed to removing or retrofitting low-head dams. You can also be an advocate for fish passage and connectivity and looking at watershed scale connectivity, because this helps provide funding and support for addressing low-head dams because, right, they block that connectivity. You can also get involved in new structure development. We're not naive to the fact that structures are continuing to be built, but you all, especially our engineers on the call, can get in there early on and advocate that there's connectivity considered for both people and fish and that it's navigable. You can join or start an aquatic connectivity team. We're hoping that in a few years that map can be fully blue. It's not there yet, so help us make it blue with those aquatic connectivity teams. And you can also remove unnecessary dams. And there's a lot of resources if you want to get started in that one. So we're going to pause for another quick poll because I want to know, what are you all here planning on doing? So here's your poll. What are your next steps for how you're going to address low-head dams? Awesome. I love this. Lots of spread awareness, lots of advocacy. A lot of removing unnecessary dams. Okay, I'll give 5 more seconds and then I'll share the results with you all. Okay, wow, that was a lot of participation. Thanks all. So hopefully you all can see this. We've got a lot of folks who are planning on spreading awareness and advocating for fish passage and connectivity and removing unnecessary dams. All right, Hattie, we got to get to work. We got 31 who are going to join an aquatic connectivity team. So thanks all for participating in that. We're also here. Think of us as a resource for your next steps. Hattie and I want to make ourselves available, and we want to support you wherever you are in your journey to address low head dams. It is critically important that we take the time to address these now. We want to prevent additional fatalities. We want to keep our rivers healthy and keep them safe for those who are enjoying them. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We have lots of time for questions and answers, so please take a moment to enter your Q&A into the chat or into the Q&A feature. And also, if you enter your thoughts into the chat if you have them and you want to share. And stop sharing this.
We've got a couple of questions in the Q&A, and we will, if we don't get to them all here, we'll share our information at the end. But there's one that I wanted to jump in and address because it is something I intended to and failed to mention kind of at the beginning of what is a low head dam. So the question was, what is the benefit from low head dams, knowing how unsafe they are? It's difficult to imagine a purpose for keeping them around. Fantastic question. And I think, and I apologize for not starting with that. The low head dams have been built in rivers. I mean, we saw the multitude of dots on that map for so many reasons. They're used for water diversion. They're used for mill operations, small hydroelectricity. They're in some places, I worked on a project one time, they were called, this is gross, so I apologize, but they were called beautification dams. And the purpose, the river was where all of the city's sewage was dumped, not a totally unique story by any means, but to to have the solids drop out, they created 4 low head dams across the river to slow the water down, allow those solids to drop out and have it look beautiful as it floated through the city still. So the benefits are far and wide. As I mentioned a little bit in my presentation here in Colorado, we at a lot of points it is diverting water for consumptive use. So whether that's municipal or agricultural, industrial, they're all being created or being used. Many of those are still being used actively today. The thing that we talk a lot about our work here in Colorado, specifically to those dams that are still providing a benefit, is how can we retrofit that structure so it doesn't create those dangerous features? There are really good examples all around the country. I would point to one that just popped into my head first is the in Bend, Oregon, the Bend Whitewater Park was created to maintain the water level so that the city could still divert for their municipal resources. And then it basically steps down in smaller structures and 3 different channels to mitigate the danger that was created by that dam. And that's just one of many examples. So when we talk about retrofitting these structures, it's changing the engineering of the dam to make it so we get rid of that submerged hydraulic jump, that recirculating washing machine current that traps people and often causes that drowning effect. So thank you for that question and reminding me to share that piece.
Let's see here. How did they generate credits by removing the dam? I can take that one. So North Carolina established credit guidance for mitigation banking that included dam removal. Most mitigation banks for environmental impact credits, those are for stream restoration or wetland restoration. But North Carolina decided to adopt credits that would be specific to dam removal. And they actually removed 3 dams that provided mitigation banking credits. So folks worked with the local Army Corps of Engineers offices and districts, and they established this guidance. For a variety of reasons, that guidance was rescinded, and there's minimal guidance for generating credits by removing a dam. So there's some interest in it, and I know that some mitigation banking firms have been trying to advance this and have more opportunities for it as a resource, but that's what happened in North Carolina. Answer live, done. There's a couple ones that we've just typed in an answer. So if you guys look in the answered questions, you might see them there. How do you get 401 certifications for dam removals? Great question. We have an abundance of resource on this. You have to work with your local regulators, and it can vary from state to state. So if you want to follow up, I'm happy to point you in the direction of some more specific resources for that.
There's one I wanted to answer. Now I lost it. I think it was the very first one. Todd asked, the diagram showed a concrete foundation on the downstream side, presumably scoured clean of gravel. Does the downstream substrate make a difference? And this was somewhat related to a question I typed an answer to, was kind of like, how far downstream should you direct people to be getting back in the boat? And so I think to answer both questions here live, that it's very different for every low-head dam. There's a lot of factors like the size of the dam, the slope of the face of the dam, as you're talking about here, Todd, the substrate material at the bottom. But basically, water, when it hits something, it bounces off of it. And so oftentimes you'll see, like, we call it an apron, like a concrete apron that's kind of poured at the bottom of the dam, that when that water can bounce, this is a very dumbed down version. I'm sure lots of you are engineers cringing at my answer right now, but it basically, it makes a more perfect and clean high recirculating current. And so I think the downstream substrate does make a difference. But even if that is just riverbed, it still has that potential to create that submerged hydraulic jump, that recirculating current.
Thanks, Hattie. Do you want to take on the low-head dam inventory question from state inventories?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that was another good one. Yeah, so Foster asked is if the National Low-Head Dam Inventory was built from state dam inventories. And again, Rollin Hotchkiss, if I get this wrong, please correct me in the chat. But the answer is yes, and for states that did have state inventories, those were incorporated. Rollin and others had students that helped build these. The Southeastern Aquatic Resources Partnership contributed data to that. And then the National Low-Head Dam Task Force took on an impressive quality control initiative to then go through and look at every single potential low-head dam that was identified through all these different resources and clean them up. And as you heard Katie say, that's something that work done by the National Low-Head Dam Task Force and led by Rollin Hotchkiss is being incorporated into the National Low-Head Dam Inventory that the Army Corps of Engineers will now manage and host. And so I think the intention from the Corps side is to continue to, to add and clean up and add information about those structures as they build out that national inventory.
Thanks, Hattie. We've got a question from Todd. Vermont dam removal projects are generally no cost to the dam owner. Is that similar across the US? It is not. Vermont, you are unique. There is state funding and federal funding for dam removals, but it is not for every single project, especially for folks with bigger projects there is the hope or the desire that those dam owners will support the dam removal to some extent. That being said, a lot of the folks who have really small dams, if their dam is not creating money, generally speaking, they do not have money to maintain it, nor do they have money to remove it. So a lot of times organizations like ours will step in and help with the grant writing and help with securing funding for removing that project. So there's not a guaranteed source of funding for all projects, but we are actually working on identifying at the state level where all those funding sources are, how they get that funding, and trying to make that information more public. So states who don't currently have that funding source, if they want to establish them, we can say, hey, here's what Vermont and these other states have done to provide funding for dam removals. Good question.
I'll jump in on Chris's question about the public education about hazards when boating and personal responsibility of the individual recreator. And so this also, I'll try to kind of answer two questions in one here. There's another one. Are there cases where dam owners are held liable for deaths that occur as the result of their dam? So that's kind of like the two sides of the coin here, right? It's kind of like what's the responsibility of the individual recreator? What's the responsibility of the dam owner? And this is an issue of state law, so it changes where you are. I can only really speak knowledgeably to how we address it here in Colorado, but there are good, relatively, good liability protections for landowners, for people taking on recreation opportunities. That being said, at these structures that have had, known fatalities, I'm not familiar exactly where that dam owner has been held liable, but it has been, in Katie's example of Mount Chavano Dam on the Arkansas River is where those fatalities were the reason that dam came out. And so both of those things, it depends on where you are. I think the other thing I'll say too, just on public education and personal responsibility, that was kind of the initial way we address things here in Colorado, and other states have as well, with the legislation that requires signage, things like that. That is a really good first step, because I think as I spoke about, what is a low head dam, the reason these things can be so dangerous for people is, you're expecting a nice, easy float on your tube and come across a horizon line. You can barely tell this thing's there, and then can get caught in that hydraulic. So it's hard to put that responsibility on the recreator, because the danger and risk associated with low head dams is outsized compared to kind of, I think, what the use on the river. It's not like a class 5 kayaking run that people are expecting to go in and contend with a high level of risk. So hopefully that kind of answers those two questions.
Yeah, thank you, Hattie, for that. There's one question about, is there any pending federal legislation to mandate safety buoys and signage for low head dams? Not that I'm aware of, or at the federal level. And this is really complicated, because a lot of low head dams, as I mentioned, they're not actually in jurisdiction of dam safety offices, whether they be state or federal offices, because they're so small. So having that mandated for all low head dams to have signage would be great, and we wanted that. But then you run into the question of, like, who's actually enforcing that? I work really closely with a lot of state dam safety offices, as Hattie does in Colorado, and they are already working their butts off, and they're stretched then to regulate the dams that are in their jurisdiction. And if we were to all of a sudden add in, the 13,000 low head dams, which some states do regulate, but not all of them do. So if we were to add all in those, we need to also increase their capacity, increase their staffing, increase their funding if we're going to do that, which I'm not saying is impossible. We should do that ultimately, like that would be a goal. But it's not in the pipeline right now. And especially with the decreased amount of funding available at the federal level, we probably won't see changes for a little while.
Sean had a question. Besides funding, what is the difficulty in removing unused dams? I think one of the biggest ones is figuring out whose it is. Oftentimes these are orphan dams that people, many low head dams are very old structures. They've been in the river 100+ years. And so figuring out whose it is, oftentimes people have just walked away from them. So that can be a really big issue. And then I think I've heard this from a number of people as well, specifically for unused, just completely defunct dam structures, that there is like a local connection to the structure, that you can run into issues with state historic preservation offices, especially for these older structures. So in my mind, that seems kind of silly, and there are options to move forward with putting a plaque up and saying, hey, this dam used to be here. But that has created significant roadblocks in projects. Yeah, anything else you have to add to that, Katie?
Yeah, the community engagement or affiliation with the dam is sometimes a big hurdle, even if there's not an owner. And we've actually seen some cases where the community has said, oh, well, we'll take ownership of it. And they don't quite realize what it takes to maintain a dam. Sometimes they've been successful. I know at least one in Texas where they did raise the money to take on the safety and repair needs for the dam. But other times people are very attached to the dam. Got my first kiss at the dam, all those stories of attachment, and they don't want to let it go, even though it is a big safety hazard and there's nobody taking care of the dam or maintaining it. And the funding is another obstacle as well. It is expensive to remove dams, or can be. We've got time for one more question. Let's see here. Okay, some of these are just answered. I think we might have gotten them all. A lot of those are just comments. Okay. Hattie, are we good?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Really appreciate everybody, and thanks for all the great engagement. The chat, I've been trying to keep up, but there's been a lot of good resources have gone in there too. So
yeah, well, I'll save the chat. I'll pull out the resources and save with everybody. Thank you, Hattie, for joining me on this presentation, and thank you all for joining us for this important topic. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. I'll follow up with the recording and additional resources soon. So take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.